update of my experience with the Canon 5D Mark II. I've had it for a week, 2 weeks now, and I'm still getting used to it. I think if I didn't have a Nikon beforehand, or if I had just gone, straight into Canon ownership, then I would be totally okay with it. Everything would be absolutely fine and I would know everything. But because my head is almost wired Nikon style, with knowing where the buttons and having two dual bits and all that kind of stuff, I kind of keep getting confused. I keep on going, where is the button? I really need to look for where the button is. And at the moment, I'm finding that the ergonomics of this camera not as friendly as the Nikon one. However, I'd imagine potentially people who've gone from Canon to Nikon probably find that Nikon is also ergonomically not as good. So I think it's really more just if you have started with a certain camera band, you really know the camera. You should be able to go from a Nikon D3000 to a Nikon D700 without really having too much confusion, as long as you know all the settings on the first camera. Going on to the next camera should be absolutely fine. But I think going from a brand to a brand, that's where you've got to completely rewire your brain to understand, or to just get used to the feeling of where all the buttons are. Now, there's been quite a few people that have mentioned that Canon autofocus system is not as good as Nikon's. Now, where I say Nikon wins is the fact that it's got 51 or 52 or something points, dots on its sensor array, so you can choose between 51 points in the thing. But this only has 9, or is it 12? Hold on, let me have a little check. 9. Okay, so not a huge amount of points. And I do sometimes find myself thinking, if only there was a dot there, or I only wish the autofocus would choose its point in between some of the certain points that it's got in this. So that is a little bit of a downturn. However, its accuracy I haven't had any problems with, which is what some people are saying about it, that accuracy isn't that good. I, certainly with this lens, the 16 to 35mm, haven't really had any problem with that at all. However, this is a very wide angle lens, and I'd really need a more of a portrait lens to really see how well and accurate its focus is. Because when you're this wide angle, pretty much everything's in focus at any focal length. But one of the biggest things about this camera, which I love, and I don't think it's just this camera, I think it's Canon in general, is its screen on the back. Pretty much every time I've taken a photo so far, I've kind of gone, oh, that looks good. And I don't know whether it's the vibrance is higher, or the saturation, or the contrast, or its sharpness, or something, but whenever a photo comes up on the back of this, I look at it and go, that's an amazing photo. Oh my goodness. However, with my Nikon, I don't think the photos on the back of the screen look as good. Now, the thing is, I don't know whether, well, I'm still finding out that what's on this may be an enhanced version of what comes up on the camera, of what comes up on the computer. Because I'm obviously just shooting RAW, and there's nothing that's really staying in the RAW file whenever it goes onto the computer. However, I think it shows you here kind of more of a saturated, more of an interesting picture, and it does, it just looks good. And that's why I understand if somebody goes to a camera shop and gets a Nikon, takes it outside, takes a couple of photos, looks at the photo, goes, yeah, they're photos, picks up a Canon afterwards and goes and takes the photos and go, ooh, so much better. So I can see, I think that is probably their strongest point of making people buy their cameras. They just go out, 2 photos and think, that looks amazing, that looks better than any point and shoot. And that makes people kind of go, I want to buy that straight away. Frames per second, I haven't had a problem with that at all, although I haven't done any sports yet. It's, I think, 3.9, it's effectively 4 frames a second. I've been absolutely fine with some of the landscapes. Some of the kind of, I've done bracketed shots where we're taking 1, 2, 3 shots, or 4 or 5 shots in one go. I do like the bracketing system on this, where you can choose up to 2 stops in between each photo, so it can be +2, center, then -2. With Nikon, I would have to do 5 photos, so it'd be +2, +1, 0, -1, -2. So there, the Nikon, I would need to be holding it more steady for longer. Also with this one, I can go up to 3rd stop, so I can go +1 1/3, 0, and -1 1/3, which is kind of more where I want my kind of range to be. So I like that on this. However, what I don't like is that only gives you a -2 or +2 exposure compensation. With my Nikon, it gives me a +5 or -5, which can be very handy if you're shooting something into the sun. However, if you're doing something like that, just go in manual, because you pretty much know how to look at the image on the back of your camera and see what you like. So just to conclude, so far, is doing brilliantly. Its video function as well is lovely, and its photos are coming out beautifully. No disappointment in any way about this camera at all. The only disappointment is more with my brain, trying to remember where the buttons are and trying to go through all the menus and get all the settings sorted. So yeah, still loving it. Big style. But don't worry, I'm still with Nikon at the same time. And I love my Nikon, and it's just so much easier for me to use. But I don't know if that's a general thing. Anyway, tell me what you think. Does anybody know if there is a proper identifiable difference between Canon and Nikon in terms of ergonomics and button display? Especially when you look at the new Canon 1D Mark X. I've looked at the pictures of that and it just looks like almost like a NASA spaceship with just so many buttons that don't, have they really been thought about where they go? I'm sure they have. They've probably spent millions on it. However, with this one, I can always tell you there's already a button. If this wasn't a live view function and it's the direct to print button, I would never use that. And I think that's what they've got in some of their other cameras. Just never direct print. Who does that? Anyway, tell me what you think. Cheers. Bye bye.